Well, hi there, everybody. Let's see how this goes, shall we? Welcome to my first special hangout for Patreon patrons. All of you guys who are out there watching are free to watch, but if you want to join in the fun with me, you have to be a Patreon patron. And if you are a Patreon patron of mine and you want to join this hangout and talk to me on the air, go to my Patreon page and click the link in my activity feed, and that will bring you right into the hangout. For the moment, I am joined by one of my great patrons. This is Henrik. Thank you so much for joining me, sir. How are you doing?
Yeah, I'm just fine, thanks. How are you doing?
I couldn't possibly be any better. um, was there anything specifically that you wanted to talk about, or?
No, I just thought I'd join to, keep in on fun.
There
So,
won't be.
yeah, I have nothing in particular I want to, specifically talk about, but.
Okay. What's going? Well, let's get to know each other a little bit.
Yeah, sure.
Tell me a little bit about yourself. Like, I can sort of peek at your info here and figure out where you're from, but why don't we talk about that? Where are you from in the world? What sort of what's going on in your life? That sort of thing.
I'm born and bred Swede.
Okay.
Moved to Ireland 10 years ago, where I'm at the moment. And I'm working for a major games company right now as a reporting analyst. I don't have much life, so that makes it.
I guess if you had a more interesting life, you wouldn't be here right now.
Well,
what sort of was it work that brought you to Ireland from?
well, I woke up this morning and I felt I want a real proper Guinness. No, it was work. I was unemployed in Sweden for a full year, and the way it was in Sweden back then, it was like if you didn't have a college degree, you couldn't get a job in McDonald's even.
Oh wow!
Yeah. So instead of being one of 500 to 600 people applying for any job, I decided to look elsewhere, and I found a job here in Ireland, and you're one of 5 to 6 people looking for a job. So it's much more easier to make a mark there. And I got the job of, I think was the second job I applied for when I looked abroad.
Now, is your field one that is particularly strong in Ireland as opposed to where you started, or?
Well, I was looking for a Swedish-speaking job in Ireland, so it was. I got a job at the call center for a phone developer. So it was. It wasn't many that could apply to the job either.
Okay. How do you like the work? I mean, is it something that you always wanted to do, or is it something you're just kind of doing for a living, or?
I'm not doing that anymore. I'm I'm a reporter.
Oh yeah, what you're doing now.
So I work with SQL the full day long, and that's basically something I love.
Awesome.
Yeah, it's my dream. It's for a company I've known now since I was a small kid. I was playing their games, and when I saw they were opening a center here in Cork, I just couldn't not apply. And I got the job, and I couldn't be happier with it.
That's great. You know, I'm not really much of a gamer these days, but when I was younger, I remember maybe the reason I'm not as much of a gamer nowadays is because I got into it like after all my friends did. Like when I was really young, the big entertainment system, the big game system was like the original Nintendo, and I was like the last person in my peer group to actually have one. You know, like my family was always like, we were the last ones to get cable, we were the last ones to get, like computers and stuff like that. And when I finally got one, everybody had already had theirs for like years and years and years, and they were moving on like to Super Nintendo and Sega Genesis and those generation consoles. So I never really was like attached to it as much as other people were. But I remember being like maybe 10 years old, and I came up with this idea for a Mario game, and I wrote out like a pitch for it and everything, and like
Okay.
what I thought the game should be, and what, yeah, I mean, I came up with like a story for it and different characters and what the premise would be and how this would be different from the other Mario games. I think this was like right after Mario 3 had come out, and it was like this huge game, and I sent it to Nintendo, and they actually wrote me back, which I thought was really
Okay.
cool. Like they sent
Yeah.
me a letter back and basically said, thanks very much, but we don't accept outside submissions. You know, but I thought that was really cool that they actually took the time to send a response to some anonymous kid. You know.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. I mean, I think that's a sign of a great company, actually. When they take the time to get personal with their customers. That might have sounded wrong, but you know what I mean.
Yeah, yeah, I know what you mean. Make
Yeah,
people feel like they actually care about you. You're not
yeah,
just sending it off into the ether and it's never going to come back.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Um, I'm trying to remember what the game was. It was the premise of the game was that it was a Mario game where the Goombas, the little guys that you smash, that were like sort of the foot soldiers, were going to take over and become like the primary antagonists. Like they were tired of being just the little guys that got stomped on by Mario and being pushed around, and they were going to like rise up and become the big enemies. But
Yeah,
that never went anywhere.
yeah. Well, you might have been a millionaire now if they had taken the idea.
Yeah,
Who knows?
right. Yeah, I could have had a whole new career. Well,
Yeah,
the thing about it is, like, I don't know. It's one of those careers that a lot of people do now. I mean, the gaming industry in general, I think, is just really growing, and people work on it. As I'm sure you know better than I do, because you're a lot
yeah,
closer to it than I am. I mean, there are people who work on the development side, and people work like in the critical side, reviewing it or writing about it or reporting about it. You know, and it's just such a big growth industry. But like, I remember one of the things that I read in the little letter that someone from Nintendo sent me back was, well, maybe you can pursue this as a career. Maybe you can become a game developer. Then you could work for us for real, and maybe we'll make your game someday. And I realized after looking into that just a little bit, like how hard that was. I mean, like people. I think people outside of gamer culture have this stereotypical view of like game developers and people who are involved in the gamer culture in general as being just like, they're just nerds and they play video games all day and they're just these lazy people, and
yeah,
to me, there's so many skills involved that I don't have. Like the tiny little moment in my life when I flirted with possibly pursuing that seriously, I was like intimidated by how much I would have to do to get into
yeah,
it and be good at it.
yeah, yeah. No, but that's one of the things I love about uh, the developing today. It's everything has been so much standardized and simplified, so people can actually sit at home and create their own small games. And with Kickstarter and sites like that, it's
Mm.
so much easier, I think, for in the developers to get their products out. And I think that's such a great thing.
How is
Um,
it? Go ahead.
no, I was just going to say it's just about the same with film at the moment as well.
Oh yeah, yeah, that's a good analogy. It's definitely opened up a lot. The
Yeah,
possibility of being a creator, not just an audience member, has really opened up a lot.
yeah, yeah.
Um, what
You,
you said? No, go ahead.
no, you were saying something.
Well, you said you've been like the company you're working for now. You played their games when you were younger. As you sound like someone who's been both like a player and also involved in the industry. Like, how do you think it's changed over the years? Because I can see certain changes just from someone who played video games a little bit when I was a kid, and then occasionally, like, I'll sort of if I'm over at a friend's house and they're playing like something on they're playing like Call of Duty or something on their Xbox, they might ask me to play with them for a little bit. And I mean, it's like the evolution of not just technically, but just in terms of the focus of the games, has really, really impressed me. Like,
yeah, I think it's been following the same kind of path line as movies, actually. Back in the days when the game industry really took off, it was much more people just experimenting. They were having fun with the ideas. They were just, this would be so cool to do. And I want to do it this way and that way and so on. Nowadays, it's much more about what's actually produced, what can be sold. And it's roughly the same thing as with the movies. Back in the days, I mean, lots of the classical movies nowadays wouldn't be made now because it's too, they need to make sure that the money comes back. And I don't want to say it destroyed any industry, absolutely not, but it certainly changed the industry, both gaming and movies. Oh, and by the way, I am a movie buff as well, as you might have suspected by now.
There are a lot of parallels, actually, I think. Again, coming from a relatively ignorant place as far as games are concerned, but just from what I can sort of glean from the outside, it seems like games today, the really big popular games, are a lot more immersive. Like, and I can try to draw a comparison that I'm a little bit more qualified to make. Like, I remember, because as you probably know from watching my stuff, like, I'm a big Batman fan. And I remember, like, the great Batman game when I was a kid was a Nintendo game called Batman Return of the Joker, which was praised for, like, it was 8-bit, but the graphics for 8-bit graphics were, like, really good, and it had a really strong, like, storyline, and it was challenging, but it wasn't impossible to beat. And it was one of my favorite games when I was playing games. But you compare something like that to something like the Batman Arkham games that are so huge now. It's like a completely different world. Not just in terms of, I mean, obviously the technology is a lot more advanced and the graphics are far, far beyond what they were back then. But it's much more immersive. It's like you're not just like reenacting scenes from a movie or doing like a side scroll shooter thing. I mean, you're actually taking assuming the role of a character in a story. They're much more about putting you, like, a movie is a passive experience where you're watching a story unfold, and the video game is taking that premise but sort of pulling you into the story, making you a character inside of it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's part of the development as well. The story-based game has become so much more involved nowadays. Like the first couple of games, the text-based games, those were a proper story, but then you got the graphic games, so you couldn't have that much story because the technology wasn't there. You only had a certain amount of space, everything like that. So it was basically just platform, shoot 'em up, things like that. Nowadays, we're going back to where you can tell actual stories, manuscript stories, involving stories that's really good. Most of them are quite dark, actually, which I don't really understand, but never mind. So yeah, I think it's a great development, actually, and the immersiveness. Actually, I just got this the other day, the Oculus.
Oh wow! Yeah.
Have you tried that?
I haven't. No.
Okay, you have to try it. If you want anything immersive, you have to try it. There is. Actually, I played a space game when I was younger. It was called Elite. And I was sitting at the front of my computer. It was, I think it was like an 8-inch screen CRT,
Yeah.
And but it felt like you were sitting in a cockpit. You were looking out the front view, the front view of the ship as you were flying through space and battling other ships and so on. And they are just remaking that game now, and it works with Oculus, and it's just you no longer have that feeling. You're actually there now.
That's
It's amazing.
that's awesome. It's
Yeah.
so exciting to see that technology finally start to sort of, you know, come to fruition, because that's something I remember being 10, 12 years old and hearing people talk about, oh, there's going to be virtual reality and there're going to be these helmets you put on. And, I mean, and you see them like in old TV shows and old movies, like from the 90s where they're, and now there's actually a thing
Yeah.
that does that. And I'm like, according to you, according to lots of people that I've talked to that have used it, I've never used it, but that it is, really well done. Like it's a really convincing effect.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. Uh,
It's
yeah, I just can't think of playing the game without it at the moment. I mean, it looks so amazing on the monitor, but you just don't feel it the same way as when you're playing it with Oculus now.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, actually, it's funny you brought that up. My wife and I went, we took a trip to a local, like a historical site not far from here, and and it was a really nice day, but there were lots of other people there, and we're both sort of people that uh, like to do our own thing and not be in other people's way and not have other people in our way. And my wife commented to me like, I wish we could go places without having to travel, and like without having other people around. And I said, well, we need to get you an Oculus, so you could go places without having to actually leave the house.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah, actually, I saw a really cool thing here just the other day. Do you know the first movie that was ever made? It's just the only remnants of that is on paper film at the moment.
oh,
Uh,
was it one of those? I always think of like the Lumiere brothers thing, like the people leaving
yeah,
the factory.
it's even before.
Yeah, what is it?
It's from a train station in France. Yeah, just a train leaving the station.
Okay.
It's like I think it's 2 minutes long or something like that. And there was a guy that went out with a camera, setting it up properly to that station and film it for the Oculus, so you can actually stand there and look around you.
Oh
And
wow.
it's like you see everything in 3D. You can't move, sure, but it feels like you're actually there now. And I just thought it was such a great reference back to the first actual movie ever made, or film, I should say. It wasn't a movie.
Yeah, that is amazing.
Yeah.
That is really amazing. I feel like I want to get one just just for that. Well, because like I know I've been fascinated ever since I became like a serious movie person. Like I've been fascinated by like that early period, like the earliest films, where when it wasn't even thought of as like a narrative device, it was just
Yeah.
people showing each other home movies and going, oh my God, like the pictures are moving, and you know and I a couple, maybe 10 years ago, maybe even a little longer than that, they discovered a print, like it was a complete print, or the most complete print that they had ever found of
Metropolis.
yeah, well, Metropolis had been around for a while, but it was the Thomas Edison's Frankenstein,
Oh, okay.
which is it's like 10 minutes long, and it's a very early silent film. I think it was made in maybe like 1905, 1908, something like that. And it's very stagey. It's a lot like a lot of those early silent films. Like the camera's locked down, and it's just one wide shot of a soundstage, and the actors kind of just walk back and forth in front of a fixed frame. And maybe there's one or two close-ups, like for the really really important stuff, but mostly it's just a static shot.
Yeah.
And it's a lot of like camera tricks, like stop motion, or turn the camera off, rearrange the set, turn the camera back on so it looks like things vanish, like George Méliès
Yeah.
type stuff. But it was like fascinating to watch. They released it on DVD, and I got it like as soon as it was available. Like I ordered it from Amazon or whatever website I found that offered it, and it was just it was like looking back in time. It was like you're watching not just a movie but a historical document, you know.
Yeah.
And to think of being able to put on a pair of goggles and watch it and make it feel like you're actually there watching it, even though it wouldn't
Yeah,
be exactly the same. Like there's something really, really appealing about that, you know.
yeah, absolutely. But you said it was Thomas Edison's uh, Frankenstein.
Frankenstein, yeah.
Okay, I gotta
Yeah.
look that up.
Yeah, I'm sure it's got to be available online. I'm sure it is.
Yeah,
It's public domain, and yeah, it was because Edison he wasn't a director, but he was fascinated by movies so much so, as you probably know some of the story, like, you know, he stole movies from European filmmakers and released them in America without giving
yeah,
them any copyright or any payment or anything.
yeah. I think he did that. Or someone actually did that anyway with Metropolis.
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, and that, which is kind of surprising because by the time Metropolis came out, that was relatively, you know, well on in the game. I mean, Metropolis is from the 20s,
yeah.
but yeah, that sort of thing was still going on, where they were like, "Oh, that's a good. I saw the greatest movie in Paris. I'm just going to get a copy of it and show it over here and not tell anybody." You know, like that kind of thing
Yeah,
happened. It would
yeah.
never happen today.
The time was so much simpler back then.
Yeah. Well, let's talk a little bit about movies since you're a movie buff.
Yeah, sure.
What are some movies that you've seen recently that have sort of jumped
Oh,
out at you?
uh, God, that's a very good question.
I asked you too quickly.
Yeah, that's something you really need to sit down and think about. But if I answer it like this, anyway, one
Okay.
of my one of the movies that have inspired me the most is probably The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, I totally love that movie. It's the settings, the what you call it, the props, everything like that. It's just so awe-inspiring, I think. And then the fact that it's one of the first movies with an actual twist as well. And we got one more now.
Yeah. Kristi is joining us. She just ran away.
Yeah.
She just ran off camera. Well, when she comes, oh, here she is.
Your microphone is off at the moment.
Yeah, let me. Yeah, she's. I think you're muted there, Kristi. There you
There
go.
we go.
You all right?
There we go.
Oh,
Hi, Kristi.
hey, how you doing?
Good. We were just talking about movies.
Oh, that's good.
So how's it going?
Oh, really good. I'm a bit late. I lost track of the time, so yeah. So, but really happy to be here, and very excited. So,
Well, happy to have you. I'm glad you made it. I remember I saw your couple of your comments saying that you were interested in trying to show up, so I'm glad you made it.
yes.
This is Henrik.
Hello.
Hello.
We're all friends now.
Yeah. And what was the film or films you were speaking about?
Well,
Yeah,
Henrik was just talking about the Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I'm a little out of my depth.
Yeah. It's from it's 1923, I think it is.
Can we do Mystery Science Theater 3000? That would be easier for me.
That's right up my wheelhouse too. Henrik, are you a Mystery Science Theater fan, or will we be going off into unfamiliar territory?
You're going off in a little bit of familiar territory. I know what it is. I've seen a little bit of it, but I think it was mostly big in the U.S.
Okay.
It was never anything back in Sweden or anything like that. But I mean, I've seen it on like YouTube clips and
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's
it
some.
was
Go
pretty
ahead.
cult.
Go ahead. Yourself.
Yeah, it's pretty cult even in the U.S. But for me, I guess I was probably in my teens, and it really defined my love of bad movies. I really became like a big fan of bad movies because of MST3K. So it shaped me in terms of films that way.
Yeah, same here. I remember the first time I ever saw it. I think I had heard about it, but as I was telling Henrik earlier, I mean, my family didn't get cable even until like I was almost a teenager. I was like one of the last members of my peer group to get cable, so I never watched it on Comedy Central until I was older. and in sci-fi for the last couple of years. But they had like a syndicated version of it called the Mystery Science Theater Hour, where they would cut the episodes in half, and they would show an hour one week, and then they would show like the second half as another hour the next week. And the first episode I ever saw was that version of The Amazing Colossal Man. And they showed it like really, really late at night on some local TV station, and I was like laying in bed flipping through the channels in my TV, and I saw it. And like the little shadows at the bottom, and they're making comments while the movie's playing, and it's like I just immediately got it.
Yeah.
And I thought, this is awesome. Like this is what I do to movies anyway.
Right.
And they're doing it like on a show, and it was so funny. And even though like a lot of the jokes I didn't even get, because they make these references to things like, to old TV shows or to Frank Zappa, or like to stuff like from Minnesota that nobody who wasn't from Minnesota would even get. Some stuff that I still don't get because I'm from Maryland. But it was just funny. It was, and it definitely made me love like bad movies,
Mm-hmm.
What's your favorite Mystery Science Theater episode, Kristi?
I think it's the one with Lloyd Bridges, the X spaceship one. That one's great.
Yeah, I know which one you mean. I can't remember the title. Spaceship X or something, or
something like that. Yes. And they've got the sort of one token female scientist for the love interest, and yes, it's very, very classic. Oh yeah, look it up. Great.
I do recognize that actually. I think I've seen that.
Yeah, Rocket Ship XM.
Yeah.
That's the title. That's the one with all the climbing? There's this endless sequence where they're just climbing up the side of a mountain. It just takes forever.
Oh, and they're singing Valerie Valera. Is that the one?
I think so. Yeah. Oh, it's such a great episode.
Yeah.
I don't want to leave Henrik out here, so
No.
well, because I feel like we can make it more inclusive by talking like are there any movies, because you're a movie buff, are there any movies like that are just terrible movies that you love anyway, like that you have affection for even though you recognize like this is just a horrible movie?
Well, the only one that actually springs to mind at the moment would be Eurotrip, if you've seen that.
Okay, yeah.
I mean, it's not a great movie, but it's not a directly bad movie either. But I just love the humor in it. I actually rolled around on the floor the first time I saw it. It was.
I remember. I saw that. I think when it first came out on home video. I don't think I saw it in theaters, but I remember that one. I feel similarly about Mallrats.
Oh yeah.
Like
There's a lot of Kevin Smith that's like that. That's kind of a.
I actually had a Kevin Smith marathon here the other day, where I watched everything from Clerks up to Red State.
Oh yeah.
Steve. I was just gonna say I recently watched your video where you talked about Kevin Smith movies and the article about we have to talk about Kevin Smith.
Yeah.
And I think you said that you really didn't like Jay and Silent Bob. And I really did, because I felt like a teenage boy watching it. So like I finally got what it would be to be a teenage boy watching that film.
Oh, totally.
And so for that reason, it's one of my guilty pleasure movies, because I roll on the floor laughing so hard at that film, and I know I shouldn't. Deep down, I'm so ashamed, but I can't stop myself.
I'll tell you what. Even though I don't think it's a good movie, there are, and I can say this about almost any Kevin Smith movie, even the ones that I don't think of as good movies. Like there are scenes in Jay and Silent Bob Strike Back that just kill me.
Yeah.
That just knock me on my ass. They're so funny. Like the Good Will Hunting stuff.
Oh,
where they're doing like the sequel to Good Will Hunting, and I mean, that just kills me, because I love that movie. I love Good Will Hunting, and I love that they made fun of it so brutally, and like everybody was in on it. Like Gus Van Sant was there counting his money, and Ben Affleck was there with like his frosted hair, and I mean, it murders me to see that.
It's perfect, yeah.
The bit with the where the really sick running joke that Ben Affleck kills prostitutes. It's like, where does that even come from? Oh yeah.
Like I said, it's a terrible guilty pleasure.
Yeah, Yeah, Kevin Smith. I guess because his new movie just came out, Tusk, which I haven't seen yet. But yeah, he seems like to be on a topic of conversation again. You know, people are talking about him, and he is one of like I could see. Even though I don't, I feel like I can't say I'm like a big fan of his, but I have such affection for him, and like I would totally have like a Kevin Smith marathon. You know,
Yeah,
like I.
he's a guy you'd want to hang out with just to hear some of his stories.
Oh yeah, he can talk. I mean, he like before this started, I was nervous. Like, what would I do if nobody showed up? If I were Kevin Smith, I would have no such worries because Kevin Smith could fill an hour, could fill a vacuum just talking without even breaking a sweat.
He makes conversation so easy.
Yeah, and it's like it seems like he always has like 5 or 6 things just sort of backloaded, ready to talk about at a moment's notice. Like if he's ever in a situation where he's doing a podcast or he's doing like an appearance or something and nobody wants to talk about anything, like he can just be like, okay, let's just do 20 minutes on Batman. You know, let's talk about Star Wars. That'll kill half an hour. I mean, he just has he has the gift of being able to just talk and talk and talk and usually be really entertaining when he does it.
Mm-hmm.
You know. So
I think.
Yeah.
Just very quickly, I think the bad movie I love is Tremors.
Oh yes.
Yeah.
Which I have on DVD, and on lazy Sunday afternoons, I will definitely pop in Tremors and just enjoy myself.
Tremors is a great one. Oh God, yes. Tremors is. Some of my friends that I work with in the film company that I write for are big Tremors fans too. That's a really popular one.
I had to learn German, and the one DVD I had when I started learning German was Tremors, so I ended up watching Tremors in German, which is not quite as good, but it definitely gave me a flavor for the language quite quickly.
That's great. Oh man, I wish we had watched Tremors in German in my German. I took German in college, and we watched some movies as part of the class, but we watched like Run Lola Run and The Lives of Others. I wish we had watched like German translations of Tremors. That would
Scheiße!
Oh my God, that was cool though. That was actually that German class was the first time I saw The Lives of Others. Have either of you guys seen that one?
Oh yeah, it's phenomenal.
Yeah, I saw it in the cinema. It's astonishing.
Yeah.
The one word I had for it was just delicate.
Yeah. Oh, that the performances.
Yeah.
Are just so subtle. Like I can't. It's been so long since I watched it. I can't remember the character name. But the main guy, the guy who's like the Stasi interrogator who comes around at the end. Such a subtle performance. Like it's beautiful to watch because you never see him go like from like a good guy from a bad guy to a good guy.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
In that way. Yeah. And you yourself become aware of your own voyeurism through his voyeurism. You know, us watching him watch them, you're like, wow, yes, I'm observing the way that he's observing them. It's really beautiful.
Yeah, I just remember watching it and thinking like, because there's that turn toward the end where like the people that he's watching like have that secret typewriter, and then at the end it turns out like that's what the secret police are looking for, and then when they get there looking for it, it's gone, and it turns out that he's the one who snuck in and got rid of it. And it's like there's never a moment where you think, oh, he's totally going to turn around and help them out. It just sort of happens, but it feels so natural because he's been brought to that point in such a subtle way. Like it doesn't feel like a cheat. It doesn't feel like, oh, why would he's one of the bad guys? Why would he help them out? Like it feels like, well, of course that's what he did.
His relationship feels valid. His relationship with them feels real without it being overt.
Yeah. Oh, it's such a beautiful. I'm gonna have to watch that again. I don't think my wife has watched that yet. I've mentioned it a few times, but I haven't actually convinced her to watch it. I have to watch that. I have to watch that after we finish the Roosevelts.
You're gonna have to put spoiler alert now on the Google Hangout.
Yeah. There's a typewriter thing in The Lives of Others.
What's the time limit? Is like 5 years enough?
Yeah. I don't know. I mean, you know,
that's going to say, you should have seen it by now. It's not my fault.
Right. Like, can't we talk about The Crying Game openly by this point? It's been like 20 years. Do we have to put spoiler alerts when we talk about The Crying Game? I remember when they reviewed The Crying Game on Siskel and Ebert, like right when it came out, and Siskel gave it away in the review, and Ebert was so pissed at him, like on the air. He was like, "I can't believe you said that. You spoiled the big twist of the movie. Why would you do that?" And Siskel was like, "Well, I felt like we had to talk about it if we're going to review the movie." Like, it was one of the great Siskel and Ebert moments. Like, Ebert was like, "How could you do that?"
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, I don't know. I was always more of an Ebert guy. There was this that was, speaking of like loving movies, that was a show. Siskel and Ebert was a show I used to watch that really like fostered my love of movies. And I remember there was when Gene Siskel died, there was an Onion headline, and it was just one of the headlines without an article, like on the sidebar, and it was right after Siskel died, and it just said Ebert victorious.
That's the Onion.
I still think
that's a little bit mean, actually.
Oh, it's so mean. Yeah, that's and
Yeah, it's that black humor.
Yeah, and it's so
Really dark.
like, and there's no reason for it. It's completely unjustified meanness. Like, why would you say that? The poor man. But the fact that it's so mean even makes it funnier to me. I don't know.
Ebert taught me a lot about films too, because one of the first films, actually when I bought my first DVD player, it came with 5 movies, and one of them was Dark City.
Ooh.
And on the commentary track, it was Roger Ebert's like lecture that he was giving in Colorado on some kind of basis, and he basically talks through the movie and discusses the symbolism. And it was the first time I'd heard of Metropolis and Fritz Lang, and yeah, it was commentary tracks and DVDs changed the way I watched movies.
Yeah, he did a really great commentary track. He did a bunch of great commentary tracks, but his one for Citizen Kane is really good too. Henrik, you kind of went ooh when she mentioned Dark City.
Yeah, no, it's I never heard about Dark City when I rented the movie once. We were a group of guys having a movie night, and I saw it, and it said something like very similar to The Matrix. Mm-hmm. Don't ask me why, but it did, and I was like, oh, that sounds interesting. And I love doing that, picking up totally unknown movies that you have no idea about. You never heard of them before. I did the same thing with Pi. Have you seen that?
Oh, Pi, yeah.
Yeah, Darren Aronofsky. Yeah. It was also, just a spur of the moment, looks cool kind of movie. And you find such gems when you do that. I just love doing stuff like that.
Yeah, it's one of the best things about like the movie-going experience when you walk into something like with no idea what it even is, and it turns out to be this, incredible experience.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, I saw Dark City. I'm pretty sure I went to see it in the theater. I'm positive because I read Roger Ebert's review of it, and he just raved about it. He just said this is like one of the best movies of the year. In fact, I think he did pick it as his best movie of the year that year, and I just thought it was great. And then when I saw The Matrix a year later, I thought this is just like Dark City. Only, I mean, it handles the themes much differently, but it's the same ideas. And I always preferred the way Dark City handled it to The Matrix. I view The Matrix as kind of like a guilty pleasure movie. Like I don't really appreciate it as properly as like a great film. I appreciate it as like a fun movie to watch and sort of giggle at. But Dark City, I pretty much take seriously. It really impresses me.
I do love the style of The Matrix. I think it's an impeccable style.
Yeah. Oh, and it's an incredibly well-made movie. I mean, technically, it's superb, and it does have the stylishly and the terms of like the art direction, the set design, like it's, I mean, there's a lot to admire about it. Actually, well, I do a movie review show with Jason Harding, who does Opinionville, and one of the movies we reviewed is The Matrix, and we both kind of had the same viewpoint of it, which is that, well, I think he dislikes it a lot more than I do. Like he claims he can't even watch it without getting angry. But I can watch it. I can watch it without getting angry. Like I usually have a good time when I watch it. But you know, like it grapples with all these like philosophical questions, but it does it in a really superficial way. You
Yeah,
know?
yeah, I can totally see that. But I think
But
all the, you know, all the small references, like, you know, the small white rabbit on her shoulder when she comes to knock on his door and things like that. I just love those small details all over the movie.
on the other hand, you kind of have to wonder about a movie where the star of it is Keanu Reeves. You're not going to be giving Wittgenstein lines when you've got Keanu Reeves delivering them. I mean, who's going to believe that? Seriously.
Yeah, that's true. You know, one of my favorite part of Keanu Reeves in The Matrix is actually, and this is like a running joke between my wife and I because I've talked about it so often. In the special features for The Matrix on the DVD, when they interview the cast behind the scenes, Keanu Reeves repeatedly refers to it as the piece, like it's a play or like a serious work of art. You know, like when I first became involved in the piece, or when I was thinking about, you know, the implications of the morality in the piece, and I was like, oh. I mean, it's cool that you take it seriously, but you're Keanu Reeves and you're talking about The Matrix.
Kind of sounds like he's repeating what somebody smarter was saying to him, trying to get him to, like, you know, engage with it. What the piece is saying to you is this. Oh yeah, the piece.
Or like the Wachowskis referred to it as the piece during production, and he was like, "I'm going to call it the piece. That sounds really good."
That is a great Keanu Reeves.
Oh, thank you. Speaking of bad movies, Keanu Reeves, man. Now that Patrick Swayze is no longer with us, Keanu Reeves, maybe Nicolas Cage too. Like those two are like neck and neck for like the kings of bad movies. My favorite Keanu Reeves. Go ahead.
Left Behind. You got to take down extra points.
Oh yeah. I need to see the Nicolas Cage Left Behind. I saw the original Kirk Cameron version. And by the way, how much must it sting to be Kirk Cameron to know that your version wasn't good enough? That they had to remake it and they had to put Nick Cage in there.
I was just tonight watching the Creationist Cat's review of the most recent Left Behind, saying there's not any Kirk Cameron in this. So yes, there are some bitter people out there, some really bitter people.
What about Kirk? It's like the people who are demanding that William Shatner be in the Star Trek movies now. It's like, where was Kirk Cameron?
I just want him to keep doing Sarah Palin beat poetry. That's what I want from Shatner.
Yeah, right. He should take the role they've offered him in the next Star Trek movie, but it should be just him as Captain Kirk doing Sarah Palin beat poetry.
Oh my God, I would pay money. I would pay so much money to see that.
With no explanation at all. Like they should just beam down to a planet, and there he is, like in full Kirk costume. And they're like, "Oh my God, you look so familiar. Do we know you? Or you look like the old version of Captain Kirk?" They could probably ask, and then he'd just launch into the Sarah Palin stuff. And then they would kind of go, "Okay, well, nice to see you."
Oh God.
That's how I would do it.
I would. That would go down for. I mean, that would be amazing.
And there would be like hardcore Star Trek fans whose heads would just pop in the theaters. How is he there, and what's he doing, and how does he know who Sarah Palin is, and what's he talking about?
Retcon.
Yeah, exactly. I would do stuff like that on purpose just to mess with fans, because like, as much as I love Star Trek so much, but it makes me laugh to see how like super seriously people take it sometimes, and it's like, God, who even cares?
You know? TV show.
It's a TV show. Just. Yeah,
have fun with it.
Yeah, well, because I know some people were really upset, like when the new movies started and they did the time travel thing that sort of reset the timeline, and people and there's actually a really great, if you're a Star Trek nerd, it's a really great website called Ex Artis Astris, I think, or something like that. It's a Star Trek fan site, and it has like, you know, pictures of all the ships and reviews of episodes, and so it's really like comprehensive. And the guy who runs that hated the new Star Trek I mean, he said he liked it like as a movie, but he hated like what it meant for the series because it rewound everything and restarted everything. And he was like, it's like you're telling all the fans that their favorite stories never happened. And I was like, yes, they did. Like, I've got them on DVD. I can watch them whenever I want. It's not like they went back and erased all the old stuff. Or like, this never happened. You're not allowed to watch this anymore.
It's not real. We haven't actually broke through a time warp where now all the Star Trek is gone and this is the new one.
Yeah, it's all fake anyway.
Yes. It's just another dimension. You're a sci-fi fan. You should be down with that.
Yeah.
Don't you watch Doctor Who?
You know what? Doctor Who is like the one. I still have not gotten into Doctor Who. I mean, I want to at some point. Because like I have so many friends on Facebook who are like, every time there's a new Doctor Who episode, they're always like, Doctor Who, and I'm like, okay. I mean, I should probably get into this at some point, And like they have like the entire all the episodes of like the rebooted series on Hulu, and I think they have a bunch of the old ones too, like the classic ones from back in the day too. And I started watching the first series of like the new version with Chris Eccleston as Doctor Who. In the first year, and I got like 3 or 4 episodes into it, and I just haven't gotten back into it yet because I have to sort of make time to watch it because my wife is not interested in it at all. Like, it's not something she's willing to sit down and watch with me, so I have to sort of carve out time to watch it. So, but I mean, what I've seen of it, I thought was really good, and everybody says how fucking great it is. So,
I was in the UK during my master's when they started up with Eccleston again. And so I was actually there, when the whole Who mania hit, and got to kind of follow along, and I watched through David Tennant. And then about the time it was Matt Smith, I stopped watching. But it is really a good series. And some of the episodes, you've probably heard of the one called Blink. Mm-hmm. It's as good as, you could have a feature film with some of these episodes. So yeah, there's a lot, some of them are, hit and miss, but the ones that are good are really, really good. And that's why I think they have such adoring fans and have for so long.
Yeah, and the thing that attracts me to it, is just as someone who thinks that it might be something interesting to watch, is I love shows where the premise is so open that you can imagine them doing a show about anything. Like there's no limit to what kind of story they could tell because the main character is a guy who can go anytime and anywhere. You could literally tell a story about anything. And
so just like Red Dwarf then.
Yeah, I like a lot of sci-fi shows. Yeah. Well, and in a weird way. Yeah, and my friend Doc, who I do my wrestling show with, is a huge Red Dwarf fan. I mean, he's like he keeps up on the news about it, and he is subscribes to like the fan sites and has the whole series on DVD. He's like a massive Red Dwarf fan. What was I gonna say? Oh well, like I love shows that have like really wide open premises, and a show that's like that you might not at first think of it as being like that because it's not really a sci-fi show. Is one of my favorite bad TV shows ever, which is MacGyver. Like MacGyver got to this point where at first it was like he was like a spy or he was like a government agent and he would like go overseas and rescue people from behind the Iron Curtain. But like by the 3rd or 4th season, they had basically thrown out everything other than there's this guy named MacGyver who invents stuff. And you could imagine like an episode of MacGyver being about anything. Like one of my favorite episodes was he's filling his Jeep up with gas, and this pregnant woman who's being chased by mobsters like runs up to him and asks for help. And they're off and running. Like that's the show. And I just think, God, what other show would do this? And it's horrible. It's so terrible, but it's also like so entertaining because it's just goofy and you're just like, oh fuck it, let's just go with this. Let's just see what happens. The pregnant woman is safe, by the way. He saves the pregnant lady.
Very good.
Somebody left a comment in the on the YouTube comments. Adderall Apocalypse has left a couple comments about Keanu Reeves. He says you can't just imagine Keanu saying, and I'm going to try to say this as Keanu, about that which one cannot speak, one must remain silent. So I don't know. I can imagine Keanu saying that. And then he also
please,
says,
more.
"Hark!
You're gonna have a whole new segment.
What light through yonder window breaks?" Actually, he's done Shakespeare. He was in Much Ado About Nothing, I think, the film version of Much Ado About Nothing. It was pretty much exactly like that. Adderall Apocalypse also says, "I love Point Break. I have no idea how much that has to do with anything, if anything, with the fact that it was directed by a woman." Yes, Point Break was directed by Catherine Bigelow, who is now like one of the major Hollywood directors, who's made seriously good films. And she also has Point Break on her resume. So.
I love the fact that Point Break is such an important part of Hot Fuzz, because I love Hot Fuzz so much. The references there make me love Point Break, even that much more.
Well, and Point Break for me, because I love Patrick Swayze. Patrick Swayze is like my icon of bad movies, and it's like Patrick Swayze and Keanu Reeves, and Gary Busey's running around too. It's like this major crossover of like stars of horrible movies.
The perfect storm.
Yeah. Like Patrick Swayze playing this like Zen Buddhist surfer bank robber. Like, who thinks of that?
Yeah, and we're still talking about it how many years later?
Yeah, and I think they're even remaking it.
Oh, God.
Which I'm not thrilled about, but, who would have thought when Point Break came out in like 1990, 1991, that like 20 years later they'd be like, we're going to do another one of these. Oh, yeah. Well, this has actually been a lot better than I was afraid it was going to be. We have about 8-10 minutes left before I want to wrap this up, and we have about 30 people watching, which is very cool. The viewership has grown, so they must be entertained by what we're talking about, guys.
Apparently so.
We must not be boring them too much.
They're doing the dishes and their hands are too wet to dry off of the toilet to turn us off.
I was trying to be optimistic. That's probably it, though. So you guys watching, as a reminder, this is a Patreon Hangout. So if you're watching and you happen to be a Patreon patron of mine, you can go to my Patreon page, and there's a link that you can click to join us in the Hangout in the last 8-7 minutes. Or I'm going to do this again next month, and you can join in as well. And maybe these two guys will be back, or maybe they'll be like, okay, that was fun, but I'm never going to do that again. And, someone else can join in. But this has been great. Kristi, before we get too close to the end, you have started posting videos on your YouTube channel as well, right?
I have. Thank you so much for bringing that up.
I was going to make sure to.
I very recently started my own YouTube channel. I haven't put up too much content yet, but the one reason I wanted to start a channel was because I really liked Steve's An Atheist Read series. And while you're going on hiatus for a while, I understand.
Until January.
Yeah, so for people who have a little bit of our jonesing, I'm doing something slightly different, but you can check that out. And I also do an Atheist Asks, where I have very random questions about Christianity so far. And I pose those and kind of want people to interact. So thanks for bringing that up. I wasn't really ready to do a plug, but...
Well, I know that you were doing that, and I think you mentioned it in a comment you made on one of my videos recently, because someone had said I think it was the response to someone asked a question in a You Had to Ask video about having trouble identifying as a feminist because they didn't want to be associated with like man haters. Mm-hmm. And I said, well, one of the ways to combat that is to stop being afraid. If you feel that you are a feminist, don't be afraid to call yourself one, and then the perception of that label will expand. And you brought up that you were posting your videos and you wanted to be more of a voice, to sort of carry on that example. And what's the book you're doing?
Oh, it's Karen Armstrong's A History of God.
Yeah.
It's a little bit more, requires a bit more. I have to set up kind of her theological position, and then I set up my atheist position. And I discuss in the fourth video some concepts that I think are important. So I give a bit of a theory to take through the book, because we kind of need that for the content. And then I'm in the process of editing videos 5 and 6, which are the introduction. So that's as far as we're getting, but I'm hoping to upload weekly.
Oh, awesome.
Steve, will you put her link in your section below?
Oh, yes.
That would be amazing.
Yes, I certainly will. I certainly will. Yeah, I will. I'll add it to the description of the YouTube video for this.
Perfect. Thanks.
Yeah. Because I highly recommend it. Yeah,
I'm like sending you an e-hug. That's amazing.
Oh, come on. Yeah, well, because occasionally people will send me messages and they'll be like, "Hey, I wanted to do an Atheist Reads thing. Is that okay?" And I'm like, I didn't invent it. You don't have to ask me. Like, please go for it. I actually stole the idea from someone else. There was a YouTuber a couple years ago who unfortunately is no longer on YouTube. Her channel name was Faith Fights Fact, and I think she was 17 or 18 at the time that she was doing videos, and she was atheist. She had just sort of come out as an atheist, but her family was very religious, and she eventually just closed down her channel just to avoid conflict with the Christian side of her family, which I completely understand. But before she closed her channel down, she had started doing this series called An Atheist Reads the Case for Christ, where she would, and that's literally what it was. Like, she would read like aloud from the book and then stop and comment as she went. And I thought, man, that's such a great idea. Like, somebody should do that. So I sort of did it my own way. Instead of reading from the book, I just sort of taught it like as if it was like a textbook in like a class, and gave my analysis and my opinion and my response to it. And so I stole it from her. So people who are like, "Oh, can I do that?" Yeah, go ahead. I stole the gimmick from somebody else. You go ahead and please feel free to steal it from me.
Yeah, I actually saw a video the other day called "Another Atheist Reads."
Yeah, well, Kristi, isn't that what yours is called?
Mine's
Another
a different
atheist.
Okay.
Atheist, yeah. There you go.
But I like the whole idea of people kind of taking that brand and extending it out, because it both shows the continuity and hopefully they'll overlap in search engines, so that if you find one, you'll find the other, and that way people will have a lot of content from maybe a lot of different atheist perspectives.
Absolutely, yeah. Because one of the motives behind me doing it is not, and I say this at the beginning of. Usually I say this in the first episode of a series just to try and restate the premise. I always try to say, this isn't meant to be definitive. This isn't the only atheist response to this material. This is just what I think. And there are some areas where I'm not very well informed, where my thinking is not very well developed, where someone else might be able to come in and come up with stuff that I never even thought of. And there are probably things that I get wrong, or things that, another atheist might hear me say something and go, I don't know about that. So it's just meant as like as representative of my views and as like a starting point, So the more atheists that do this sort of thing, the better. The more content there is out there, people, because Christopher Hitchens always used to say that it was important to understand the arguments against your position, and that's a tenet of good philosophy in general. You don't just come up with your argument; you anticipate the challenges to your argument, and sometimes we're not as good at that as we should be, Yeah,
that's what we talked about just before we went live, wasn't it?
Yeah, exactly. Like, it's great to have people tell you how awesome you are. Like, believe me, that's really great. That's really great. But you don't really grow from that. I mean, if everybody tells you that you're awesome, you're like, okay, I'm awesome. I think I'll just stay here. But you want to get better, and the only way you get better is by people saying, I actually think you could have done that better, or I think you're wrong about that, or I think you should rethink that, And if you don't have that,
or to expand an idea, or to say, here's a different way of thinking about it, or take it in a slightly different direction.
Right? Yeah, exactly. It's so important, and not only that. I mean, that's like the selfish reason for it, but it helps you understand people from the other side too, which is something that unfortunately a lot of I mean, religious. It's not fair to say as if only atheists do this, because religious people do the exact same thing. But when you're in an argument with someone, you're more worried about dominating them and beating them and coming out looking better than you are about actually understanding where they're coming from. And as crazy as some of the apologetics books I've read have been, and as completely out there and ignorant, and how much I disagree with a lot of it, there's also, I mean, it's good because you can see, well, okay, this is what a lot of people really think, and this is where they're coming from, and it's important to understand that, you know, and that's just as important as getting people to agree with you, is making an effort to understand what other people are saying and why they're saying it, you know.
Yeah, you can anticipate their worldview because you can start to see it from their perspective, and then when you see other videos of them saying, you're like, I knew he was going to say that, because you know exactly sort of that perspective, and it's easier then to break down their arguments as well and see the fallacies and like emotional things might be driving it. A lot of this times I think apologetics comes down to how you feel about Jesus or how you feel about God, not so much the rational side. And if you tie that all their arguments back, you see it all really comes back to that.
Yeah, definitely, absolutely. I can totally concur with that. Having slogged through, like,
Yeah. Yeah.
having slogged through like so many apologetics books, and I have a list of ones to do in the future that is depressingly long. Like I'm never gonna run out of material for this.
Don't know how you do it.
Yeah. So, oh, hero protagonist just jumped in, and we're about to wrap up. That's too bad. Yeah, it's after 1 o'clock, so I'm actually going to wrap this up. I only wanted to go for an hour. So, hero, thanks for jumping in, but I'm afraid you pretty much missed the party. But I appreciate you coming in. I appreciate you being a patron. I appreciate you participating. I hope that maybe you can try this again next month. Maybe we can have a little bit more time together. But Henrik, I let Kristi plug her YouTube channel. Is there anything you want to plug?
No, not at all.
Okay.
I think it was good she got to do that. It sounds like an interesting channel.
Okay, yeah, I will definitely. Those of you watching, I will post a link to Kristi's channel. I'll leave a comment with the link in it, and I'll also add it to the description of the video. So if you want to check out Kristi's channel, you should totally do that, because I think it's great. And well, Kristi, Henrik, thank you guys for joining me for this. This was a lot of fun. It's like a relief that this went so well. I was worried that nobody would show up. But it went really well, and it was a lot of fun. And I think more people actually watch this than watch my wrestling show, which isn't surprising, because people still ask me, like, why do you talk about wrestling? So, but thank you guys for joining me in the Hangout. Thank all of you guys who watched. I'm going to do this Patreon Hangout again next month, so you guys who are Patreon patrons of mine who want to join in the fun with me, just like Henrik and Kristi have today, watch the activity feed on my Patreon page for the participation link. And you guys who are not Patreon patrons but would like to join in this sometime, if you think what I do is worth supporting and it would not be a hardship for you, please consider joining the Patreon campaign. You can find me on patreon.com/Steve Shives. There's a link to that in the description. As I said, I'll also put a link to Kristi's channel, because it's highly recommended. And see you guys for this again next month. Thanks for watching, everybody.